Welcome, everybody, to Sound Advice, the advanced club that serves District 32 with leadership opportunities and learning opportunities and educational experiences all around leadership and growth. I really love this club. I couldn't bear to leave it behind when I left Washington State, and so I'm zooming in from North Dakota to still hang out and help out and be a part of this amazing community. And we have an amazing panelist set up here. We have Kyle, one of our former members, and we have a new person that I actually haven't met yet, which I'm super excited to get to know, that Mary brought in. But Mary is our commander-in-chief this evening, who's going to be taking in charge and leading this awesome panel discussion about ethical problems and challenges and conflicts and paradoxes and all those kinds of fun things that make your inside squirm. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mary Morrison. Please welcome Mary.
Thank you, James. So appreciate it. And Jenny, welcome. I see you unmuted yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Are you a member of a Toastmasters club within District 32 or elsewhere?
I got sent a recommendation to sit in on this by my boss. I'm not sure if he's a member of Toastmasters, but
Perfect. All right.
I'd be interested to hear the discussion.
Excellent. I love it. I hope that you find it of value. That's awesome. So we'd like to start off with a little warm up because I know. So here's the deal in this particular club. If you're familiar with other Toastmasters clubs, we don't do things in the typical way. We do have speeches. People will receive evaluations, although tonight's speakers will all be evaluated only in writing, or they'll touch base with their evaluators after the meeting. We do have 2 hours to really take a deep dive into a specific topic, and that is to help us build our leadership skills. So we do receive feedback as we would in most meetings, but we don't do, and we will be timed, but we don't do like typically a table topics or have a grammarian or an awe counter. But we also like to make sure people are engaged because we know 2 hours can be a long time to just sit and listen. I'd rather do that on YouTube when I can take little breaks. So this is our initial warm up. Just hear from people. And this does not have to be intense or difficult decision, but think about a decision that you have made and you found it difficult to choose. What do you think made it difficult? I'll give you, and I just want to hear from everybody just a few seconds maybe. I'll give you an example. I have to go to an ice cream store and have to choose between 2 flavors. Which one do I choose? It's hard for me. Why is that tough to make a decision about that? Now that's one kind of, really foo-foo kind of decision making. But what is an example you might have? Kyle and then James.
Yesterday, my wife asked me to take her out to breakfast. And we then proceeded to start this game we've played before sometimes where she asked to go out to breakfast at a certain location, which I thought was a little far away. And she started trying to say, no, we can go closer. We don't have to drive that far. And I'm saying, no, we'll go. Where do you want to, and it was who can give up the most, or who can martyr themselves so that the other person can be happy kind of thing. And we finally recognized what we were doing and had a good laugh at our own expense. And we just went and drove there. But it was, for a little while there, it was challenging. How are we going to make this decision when we each keep refusing to say what we want?
Terrific. And then I saw James had his hand raised.
Yes. Also recently, though not as recently as yesterday, the deciding to move from Washington to North Dakota. There were a lot of factors that we had to consider that came into that huge decision of not just where to go, but if we could make it still work in our little town of Aberdeen where we met. We had a lot of connections, a lot of friends, people that we were close to, people who we depended on, who were in our support network, and we were in their support networks. There was a lot of emotional connection there that we had to get processed through. And it really came down to is that the mold is killing us. And we need to move out. We need to move away. We knew we weren't going to be here super long term, and that just kind of accelerated earlier. And so instead of moving a short distance and try and retain those relationships with that tough distance of nearly short, going all the way was just as bad as hard. So you might as well just go all the way to our eventual goal destination of moving out to the Midwest at some point. But yeah, it was tough, saying goodbye and knowing that, we're going to make amazing friends over here, which we have, but saying goodbye to those friends is really tough.
That's a big life decision. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I put the question in the chat. I'd love to hear from others. A time with Cheryl.
Yeah. So some of you already know that I'm in a hospital bed, and some others don't know, but my, decision that I have to make, and I've been having to make it for quite a while now, is what to have for dinner. Because they give you a menu and you have two main choices, and then you have like sides that you can get, and then there's like a salad, or Caesar salad, or a regular salad, and your dessert, and I have to watch what I eat and be real careful. So I look at that and go, well, I like both of them. Which one do I choose? I don't want to do both of them. And so, yeah, it's a difficult decision because there's stuff I like. I like everything sometimes on there, but I've been able to do it, just like being mindful of what I'm eating and choose what I need to choose that's the best. So that's my decision making I've had to do for the last couple of weeks.
I mean, true, right? Do I choose health or do I choose appetite? And frequently they aren't in alignment. Oh,
exactly.
Yeah. All right. Someone else. So we have a couple more minutes to do this. Share a time when you made a decision and found it difficult to choose. What made it difficult? Sherry.
Well, I know myself that I have a hard time if I have too many choices. So one of the reasons I like going to Costco is because there's not that many choices. You just get what there is. But we were doing a remodel, my husband and I, and we had to choose all of these things, the wallpaper, the paint, the flooring, and there was too many choices for me. So my husband went and he narrowed it down, and he came to me with 3 or 4 choices, and I knew that I would like what he had picked out. So it was easy for me to choose between the ones that he had picked for me. So I like having just a narrow amount of choices.
Excellent. All right. I can take 2 more people. I'm going to pick on Troy because I bet he has a time.
Well, thank you, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Interestingly enough, today, something happened. I had an inordinate amount of meetings throughout the day and found myself feeling Zoom fatigued as the day wore on. And there was something for Toastmasters later in my workday. And I said to myself, well, I have sound advice tonight, and I've already promised Mary that I'm going to be there. I've got to make a decision, because if I go to both, I'm going to have a raging headache and just be wiped out. And I have Toastmasters twice tomorrow. I made the decision to not go to the earlier meeting because I'd given Mary my word. And I hadn't promised anybody else that I'd be at the other meeting. So that was my choice today. And I'm always glad I'm here. It's always great to see everybody. And talking ethics, I'm all over talking ethics. So let's do it.
All right. Terrific. Yeah. So I see Jenny and Chris unmuted. And do you have anything, a decision that you made? I found it difficult to choose, and what made it difficult, and just in a few seconds.
Yeah, it's Chris.
Yeah.
I'll go
Chris.
first. So along the lines with the other caller, we actually had a rare social event tonight. I live in Calgary, and although I had a lot of work to do this afternoon, we actually got a few of our finance and accounting and operations staff out to a bowling / treats type of afternoon, and it was awesome because we actually, for some of us, we haven't seen each other in person for literally months and months, right? Yeah. So it's just interesting to see everybody can get caught up, and it's great to collaborate again, right? You just kind of miss having people right next to you, right? So I'm happy I made that decision, and I actually miss having people face to face in the office with me, to be honest.
Well, glad you made it. Let's see, Jerry or Jenny, last one.
Well, I can go. This one, right. I think the hardest decision I've been having to make is whether or not I'm going to have that cup of coffee. I'm trying to get off the caffeine, but there are times when it's so dark and gray, I just decide to overlook the health part and get that caffeine in. And so now I have a new bad habit of getting dark roast drip with some sweet cream added to it. And I don't know if that's good or not, but it's been doing the job. So there you have it.
All right. What I love about all your examples are, anytime you find it difficult to make a decision, it is likely that there is something about your values that maybe aren't clarified enough yet, so you find it an ease of choice. So I think Kyle just put in the chat, you're right, to caffeinate or not caffeinate. Or, Cheryl, do you go with health, or do you go with appetite, or which of these, you balance out your whole day? And I joined Noom for a while, and you've probably heard that advertisements for Noom, it's this different way of looking. But one of the things I really learned from them was about decision fatigue. And it's like the earlier in the day you have to make a good decision, and this is true of ethical decision making too, the more in advance you think about what your values really are, the easier it is to make the decision when the decision time comes. So a good ethical framework can help you do that. My personal one, you'll probably hear a little bit more about it as we go along. I ask myself, is it legal? Is it moral? Is it kind? Am I being generous? And do I allow others grace? And those tend to be my framework questions, because often we have to make decisions that are about people and relationships. I do want to kick it off tonight by sharing it. I'll give you a little bit of the heads up about the agenda. We have 3 speakers. I'm going to tell you why each one of them was selected, giving you a little bit of their background. Then we'll launch into speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. They each have 9 to 10 minutes to speak. And then we'll go into a Q&A. We have time for a little break. And then depending on how many questions we end up having, we may ask you to come back and help, if we can help you work through your own scenario. This is what our club is all about, providing sound advice. So before I do my introductions to our panelists, Rosanna Zemek is our timer, and she is going to show them what they will see on the timing device for their 9 to 10 minute speech. What is it, Rosanna? What will they see?
Thank you very much, Madam Toastmaster. Speakers looking right at me, if you pin me on your gallery, when you reach your minimum of 8 minutes you'll see my background turn to green. 9 minutes yellow. And 10 minutes red, and the red flag will remain until you have completed speaking. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
All right. So I mentioned we have 3 speakers tonight. I hand-picked each one of them for a very specific reason. I'm going to share a little bit about that. Judy Young has achieved her Distinguished Toastmaster Award. That's the highest award you can achieve. She is past District Director of District 32. That is my home district. She has been a Toastmaster since 2007. She has served in all the club officer roles you have, some of them more than once. And she served in all district leadership positions. She is a member of clubs in both District 2 and District 32. I have been on and off a mentor and good friend of Judy's for a number of years. Well, we've been good friends, not on and off friends, but mentor relationship on and off for a number of years. Thank you for my clarifying my qualifications there. And one of the things that has always struck me about Judy is she's incredibly thoughtful about even the smallest decisions, so that she really works it through. And I find it makes me a much more thoughtful decision maker also about the decisions and the kinds of impacts that they have on people. So I asked Judy to help us understand how do you make your decisions? Kyle is an experienced leader. He has served our district director, District 32, just a few years ago. And for many years, Kyle worked as a team leader and technical project manager. Outside of work, outside of Toastmasters and work, he serves as a captain for the Community Emergency Response Team. I don't know a lot about the Community Emergency Response Teams, but I know that what they're about is helping prepare the community for times of emergency. You lose power, you've got a mudslide, you've got major fire in your neighborhood. How do you help prepare people? And I'm guessing in part of that preparation, people don't want to necessarily be prepared. They would rather not think about emergencies that might be happening or coming to their community. So I have known Kyle to be a very decisive leader. And I knew in back of that was some great thought that he has put into it. Our third speaker tonight, Jerry Lee Jr., graduated from Loyola Marymount University and is a law graduate of Seattle University School of Law. Jerry has worked for a number of government agencies. He has worked for the Washington State Senate, the Thurston County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, the Washington State Human Rights Commission, the Washington State Attorney General's Office. He served as the City of Tacoma's Equal Employment Opportunity Officer, where I knew him. He worked for the Seattle Fire Department's EEO office and the city and as the Human Resources Director for the City of Lacey. He is currently the Operations Manager for the Washington State Human Rights Commission, where he supervises investigators. I know Jerry, for the years that I worked with him, had many competing interests that he had to pay attention to. So he was my go-to as a member of this panel when it came to talking about ethical choices and ethical decision-making. He's also while not a Toastmaster currently, he and I were part of Tacoma bureaucrats when we worked for the City of Tacoma. So with that, I am going to do one little bit of business. James noted to everyone that the framework file he shared is a handout that Judy will be using, and she's going to share her screen. And I apologize, I bet I forgot to make sure she has hosting abilities to share her screen. So somebody's taking care of that while I'm stalling for time a little bit. Giving me a heads up is James. All right, way to go. So when choosing panelists, I thought of Judy because of the many conversations we've had about managing common situations that she's faced in Toastmasters. So she accepted the invitation, and she began thinking about the framework that she employs to solve those ethical dilemmas. And then she saw the ethical framework model that published by Toastmasters for those of us working through the paths. And she said, this is comprehensive. This is what I have done, sort of. Now she has a framework to use regularly. She is excited to share her newfound knowledge with us this evening. Please welcome Judy, whose speech title is Climbing the Mountain. Welcome, Judy, Climbing the Mountain.
Thank you very much, Mary. Last summer, the beginning of the Toastmasters program year, one summer day, sunny, beautiful, cheery outside, my mood did not match the weather. It was more like our current weather, drab and overcast. I had just left a Toastmasters meeting of a club of which I'm the president. An officer had announced that she was taking the summer off. She had family duties and she needed a sabbatical. She'd be back in September. I thought I'd like to ask her to resign. However, this club has 8 members. There's no one who can easily step into this role. We need everybody. What to do? I called my mentor. We talked it through. I made the decision to ask the officer to resign. She resigned with no hard feelings. Everything worked out well. However, if I had had this framework, that I will share my screen with, there we go. If I had had this framework before I called my mentor, I would have made the decision more comfortably, more confidently, with less stress and strain on myself, and had a more structured conversation with my mentor. So let's look at this handy dandy tool that we have to help us make these decisions that are everywhere, in everything, and seemingly all the time. The first thing to do is define the current issue. In my scenario, it's simple to ask the officer to resign or not to ask the officer to resign. That's the way you want a definition of an issue, even if the problem's more complicated, a 1 to 2 sentence specific statement of the problem. You don't need anything about the solution, your vision, specific short statement of the problem. Then list the facts. In this scenario, the facts are compact. We know them all. The officer is not going to be available for 2 months. Also, the officer was not going to training. The club's only 8 members. We need everybody. Now, in other situations, I've learned facts as I've gone along. And we've all been in those situations where someone has one perspective, another person has another. It's actually more common to have to go on a bit of a fact-finding mission. And so keep an open mind. If you learn new facts, list them, and sometimes that might make the issue different. Then list your core values that are impacted by the issue. Your core values, as Mary pointed out in the introduction, are what give you an understanding of what's truly at stake. In this case, it was club excellence. I wanted to run the club well. Respect for all the officers, including the one whom I was going to ask to resign. Treating everyone fairly. So this was important to make a good decision. Sometimes when you look at all that, you might say it's not all that important in the scheme of things. So that's another way this framework could help you. And define your options. In this case, ask the officer to resign and run the club without that office being filled. That's an option. Ask the officer to resign and someone to step into that role, which probably means someone doing double duty, but that's an option. Or not ask the officer to resign and work with an officer being absent for quite a while. Who are the stakeholders? You definitely want to know who has a dog in this fight, so to speak. Who is impacted by this decision? Sometimes a stakeholder or more than one stakeholder you will want to bring into the decision making. You want to let them help you make the decision. I think in this case with asking an officer to resign, it didn't occur to me to ask any of the club members, but it probably would have just put them on the spot. So this one I made on my own. However, there are times when and I'm sure you have too, wanted to include your whole executive team or even your whole club. We're all impacted. We can all make this decision together. List of possible decisions. To me, I would simply draw an arrow to define your. When we get into the discussion, if some people think a little differently about that, this is still an excellent framework. If you have something different here, if you list your decisions as different from your options. List the rules of the organization that affect your has governing documents, including a club constitution. Toastmasters has district leadership handbooks and club officer handbooks. I defy anybody to find the words. If a club officer is not doing their role, the club president should ask them to resign. You're probably not going to find the answer to your issue. You're going to find words to interpret. The words officers' role, words about club excellence. And it's important to know those, but being ethical means more than just following the rules. It means looking at your values. And you also will probably.
So the ethical dilemma, I know that Judy is probably continuing to talk. Hopefully you can hear me. I can see you move, so I'm assuming you can see and hear me. And meanwhile, I'm probably cutting Judy off. So I will give her an opportunity. It gives you a chance to review these questions and possibly she will figure it out, connect, disconnect, and come back on. And if anyone has any other additional comment, you can share that about any options, I should say.
Judy, if you think you're having bandwidth issues, turn off your video, stop sharing your screen, and just talk to us.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, you can hear me now. What had I said last, Mary?
You were going through the
She was talking about values.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. All right, let's see if this works now. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Good. So let's see the values. The core values, define your options. In this case, it was ask the officer to resign and conduct the club without that officer role being filled, ask the officer to resign and someone else to step into the role, which probably means someone filling two officer roles, not ask the officer to resign and conduct the club without an officer for 2 months. Who are the stakeholders? In this case, it's the club members, but whoever has a dog in this fight, so to speak, is impacted just as you are, and you may want them as part of your decision-making team. It doesn't have to be an individual decision that you make. You may want to involve a stakeholder or more than one, all of them. And then list the possible decisions. So you've got right in front of you what you could do. I think that's the same as the options in my situation. List the rules of the organization that affect your decision. You don't want to run afoul of any written rules. Toastmasters International has the club constitution and other governing documents. They have a district leadership handbook, a club officer handbook, those that you very well might want to consult. I defy you, though, to find the statement, if a club officer is not fulfilling their role, the club president should ask them to resign. You're probably not going to find the answer to your current issue. You're going to find words about club excellence, about the authority of the president, the role of the president, the role of the other officer, words to interpret. And it can be very helpful to talk to a mentor or someone experienced how these words have been interpreted in the past. The impact of each decision you could make is going to help you make it. If we ask the officer to resign, obviously we've got one less person working in an officer role. If we do not, we have this officer, but the officer's not there. We work around it. It's really more likely that things will fall through the cracks. That's what my mentor pointed out right away. It's just the reason I asked the officer to resign. Then you want to be sure you can check yes to each of these boxes. What produces the most good, and does the decision that you've made produce the most good and the least harm, respect the rights of all the stakeholders, treat everyone equally? This sentence shows why I wish I had seen this framework last summer. That's really the reason I wanted to ask the officer to resign. It's not going to be fair to ask all the other officers come to meetings, be prepared, do your work, but this other one can go on sabbatical. And I didn't want to let every officer go on sabbatical. Best serves the community, leads you to act as the person you want to be. This is both where you start and where you end up after you've done your decision making. In Western society, we so often think of our decision making as linear. Sometimes it really is circular. You want a decision from the very beginning, even if it is the kind of sort of or subconscious. I want to be the person I want to be. And then that's where you end up. So you can see that solving an ethical dilemma takes patience with some complexities, takes working through step by step, kind of like climbing a mountain, keep working at it and finally getting there. I did, in doing a little housekeeping, I found a quotation that is very fitting. It's either anonymous or from unknown, because the little piece of paper I have it on doesn't say who it's from. But since ethical decision-making is like climbing a mountain, this quotation says, let's talk about mountains. You start climbing one, you toil, you sweat, you finally reach the top. And what do you get? Well, along with a sense of accomplishment, of peace, of a job well done, along with the satisfaction of doing what you set out to do, you get a great view of the next mountain, looming, challenging, calling your name. Back to you, Mary.
Oh, fabulous, Judy. Thank you. You know, your whole speech reminds me of sometimes in leadership, when you're in that leadership position, you as the leader are the only person that can end the pain of the group because you have the authority to do so. So that is a difficult situation that is common in leaderships leaders, no matter whether you have a small team or a great team, great responsibilities or seemingly minor responsibilities. As a leader, people look to you to end the pain of the group if you have the authority and power to do so. So thank you for that. On to our next speaker, Kyle. Kyle says, we often believe that ethical leadership is about big leadership. It's the president, it's a senator, a governor, a police chief. But ethical leadership occurs in the small and in the daily and in the mundane. We all have the small and the daily and the mundane moments in our lives. And are we ready to face the ethical choices that they bring to us? Kyle is giving an icebreaker tonight. And I think after hearing him, you'll definitely agree you know him better. Sharing with us tonight lessons from a holiday dinner. Let's welcome Kyle Hall. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you, Mary. Mary said that if you think about your values in advance, it makes the decision-making easier. And I remember being asked by one of my employers, hey, we're moving the whole office from Seattle to LA. We want you to move to LA and be a project manager there. And it didn't take me but a moment to say, no, I am not going to do that. You need to give me a severance offer. Because my wife was in medical school and I like spending time with my wife and she's not going to LA. So, it was an easy decision. I understood my values there. But what happened this last Thanksgiving was not easy. It may sound small, but it wasn't easy. It may sound simple. It wasn't easy. Here's some facts you have to know about, the background facts you have to know. My mother passed about 12, 13 years ago. And 8 years ago, my wife and I moved to Squim to help take care of my dad. We live across the street from him. My older brother's a teacher living on the East Coast. I was surprised to find out how surrounded I am by people with immune system deficiencies. I have friends who are immune system deficient. I have Toastmaster friends. I have people on my Cert team. My sister-in-law is a healthcare worker at a home for the aged. Everybody is immune system deficient up there. And lastly, everybody in this story has already been vaccinated for COVID. Now that's the background. My brother, we haven't seen him in 2 years. He came out and visited before COVID hit, hasn't seen him. And he called a few months ago and says, I'm coming to visit for Thanksgiving. I was looking forward to seeing my brother. He's my older brother. I was looking forward to taking him for a drive and talking and, just catching up. But I told him, like I've told him in the past, if you're sick, don't come. On Friday night before my brother's plane flight, I called him to have a conversation about wanting to let him know about the ferry traffic he was likely to hit because they were doing some funky things with the ferries because of lack of manpower. And while we're on the phone, he goes, oh yeah, I'm getting over a cold. And a kid was taken out of my class today and sent home by the nurse with 103-degree temperature. And I was like, maybe you shouldn't come. No, I'm coming. Well, the next morning we're talking to my dad and he's like, if Chris is sick, I don't want him here. So I sent Chris a text and I said, if you haven't gotten on the plane, don't come. And I got a text back, I'm already in Chicago, halfway there. And it's like, I'm coming. But he said, I'll check into a hotel in Squim rather than staying at Dad's house. Okay, well, that was a good decision. The thing you have to understand here is I cannot trust my brother's statements about whether or not he's contagious. And I've learned this painfully because 6 years ago, he said he wasn't sick. I went and picked him up at the airport and he was getting over a cold and I got the cold and I gave it to Carol and she gave it to Renee. The only reason we didn't give it to my father was whichever one of us didn't have the cold was the person who took care of my father. The following year, we told Chris, don't come if you're sick. No, I'm fine. He shows up. He had just gotten over a flu. I got the flu. Renee got the flu. Carol got the flu. We stayed at a friend's house. My brother, some friends of ours in Seattle put us up for the night. They all got the flu. Their wife, a dear friend of ours, who's immune system deficient, turned into pneumonia. So when I say, don't come if you're sick, and he was getting over something, and the kid in his class had something. I'm not saying it was COVID. Maybe it wasn't COVID. Maybe it's just the flu. It doesn't matter. I don't want you to expose my father to it. He's turning 90. On Monday. So Chris checks into a hotel. Monday morning, I call him and we're having a difficult conversation. I was like, Chris, I wish you hadn't come being sick. It's like this Thanksgiving's not going to work out the way you want it to. And he snapped and said, well, I don't have to see any of you or talk to any of you while I'm here this week, and kind of hung up on me. And I had a knot of emotion in my chest. And it was just a huge ball of feeling. And I had to sit with it. I found a comfortable spot. I sat with it. I breathed with it. I felt the feeling rather than running away from it, which is an old habit. I sat and felt it. And after a little while, I was able to label it. And what I was feeling was sadness. And it's important to note that labeling it helped, because once I knew it was sadness, okay, I know what to do with that. Just like earlier when, the previous day when I knew that Chris was coming and he was sick, I was angry. I knew what to deal with that. I knew how to deal with anger. I had a choice to make. Well, I want to say one other thing about the sadness. When I realized I was sad because I had to tell my brother Thanksgiving wasn't going to work out the way he wanted, and tell him I'm trying to protect my father from whatever he might have brought with him, I wasn't feeling guilty. There was no guilt there. And there's a temptation to feel guilty, but it's like, no, I'm being, the fact that no part of me is feeling guilty means I'm being authentic to myself and my values and the things I care about. So I was sad that this situation came up. I was sad that my brother has created this situation. But that's not, I'm sad for him. Now here's the other question. Am I going to give into anger or fear, or am I going to be effective? The anger side of me, I just want to be, for a little while, I was really angry at my brother for coming while he was sick. And, I wanted to don my armor of righteousness and grab my lance of anger and go charge my brother, the dragon. But that's not very effective and not very useful. And it doesn't fit my value of wanting to connect with those I care about. And there's a flip side. I'm afraid of alienating my brother, whom I love. And there's one side of me that's like, well, I'll just pretend nothing's wrong and, not protect my father and not protect myself and expose my wife and my sister-in-law and all the people we know to whatever my brother might be carrying. But that's not right either. So how do I want to show up in this case? And I wanted to give my brother and my father a chance to spend some time together. And because my father's not going to be here that much longer, and my brother doesn't get to see him, hasn't seen him in 2 years, and you can't talk to my father on the phone for more than 30 seconds before he hangs up. So I wanted to give him a Thanksgiving together. Well, my brother came over and visited my father, and it was a nice sunny day out. It was cold, but it was sunny and there wasn't any wind. They sat outside, staying about 15 feet apart. Well, okay, that worked. So we did that on Monday afternoon. We did that on Tuesday. And on Thursday, we agreed that Chris would come over. He'd stay in the sunroom, my father's sunroom, and he'd stay isolated from my dad. And if he left the sunroom, he had to wear a mask. If he left the sunroom to go to the bathroom, he had to wear a mask. And I would come over and make Thanksgiving dinner. And I took a screen door and I wrapped it in cellophane, saran wrap basically, and put it up in the door between the sunroom, which means they could talk to each other and they could see each other, but it's not passing germs as much as we can. It's kind of what the assisted living places are doing. And we did this, and it seemed to work. I came over, I cooked Thanksgiving for my brother and my father. Now you'll notice I'm not mentioning anybody else. I would go home and cook Thanksgiving, work with my wife to cook Thanksgiving for her and my sister-in-law and me. I cooked 2 Thanksgivings that day, one for my brother and my father, and one for me and my wife and my sister-in-law. I wasn't getting my brother and my wife and my sister-in-law in a room at all. That would have been detrimental to Chris's health, to my brother's health. What I learned a lot about processing my own emotions, but I also learned, I knew that decisions come with a cost. If you decide to go left, you can't go right. Okay, as a project manager, you make those decisions all the time, but it's not emotional. Ethical decisions come with an emotional cost. And when you make the decision, you're deciding to carry that cost. And you're deciding to carry it for the sake of the people that you're serving. Now, maybe this sounds grandiose, but what I was deciding to do, I was deciding to keep my brother and my father isolated, but yet make a Thanksgiving for them, give them a chance to talk. And what I was deciding to do is risk that my brother will feel alienated and not want anything to do with me, and also accept the sadness that comes with having to face this. And I decided to carry those things so that my brother and my father could have a little time together. And who knows how that's going to work out in the long run. Now, I want to take an extra minute and tell you how this fits into another aspect of my life. Mary mentioned CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. Out here in Sequim, we have over 400 certs, and I'm the captain of about 20 of them. And we are training, our primary mission is to be trained so that we can go into houses and bring people out after a Cascadia earthquake event. That's our primary mission. We get brought into other stuff. We helped with vaccinations. We helped with food distribution during COVID. We've done a few other things, but our primary mission is to be able to go into houses and rescue people. There's a judgment call that happens when you're looking at a house and you're thinking about going in and rescuing people. Our goal is to rescue as many people in as short a time frame as possible, because we basically have a 3-day window in which to rescue people. And after that, the odds of finding somebody alive just plummets. So we have 72 hours in which to rescue people. We cannot risk the team if the house isn't safe. And we have to look at it and make a judgment call. And if the house isn't safe, we can hear people yelling for help inside and we have to walk away. That's a hard decision. And team members are, when they get trained and when they decide to become a part of CERT, they are accepting that they might have to look at victims. They might have to look at people who are hurt. They might have to look at people who are dead and live with just the memory of that experience. And when you decide to become a squad leader or a team captain, you decide you may have to make a decision that for the sake of my team, we're walking away from this. And we'll raise that, the fact that this house is here and there are victims there, we'll raise that up to somebody, to a higher level rescue team, but they may not get here in 3 days. They might not. And you accept the consequences and the feelings that come with that so that your team doesn't have to, and so that you can be effective. So I'm going to paste into the chat my lessons, but sitting with your emotions, help me label them. Labeling helps me understand how to deal with them. And ethical decisions come with an emotional cost, which we decide to carry. And the biggest decision I had to make was, how do I want to show up? Who do I want to be in this challenge? Madam Panel Moderator.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate you taking the extra minute to share that. I love that the contrast between what Judy shared, which was kind of a very logical framework, and the framework you present, which is when you're very emotionally involved, what do you do? So thank you for that. On to our third and final panelist tonight. Jerry Wilson Lee Jr. is a resident of Renton, Washington. He was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. And Jerry holds proud to his South Central community upbringing. He's also the proud father of 2 children, Shannon and Jason, and an even prouder grandfather to his 4-year-old grandson, Jason Jr. Jerry is a lifelong Dodgers, Raiders, and LA Lakers super fan. Jerry loves to travel. He just returned from a month-long trip to his motherland, Ghana, Africa, and he plans to travel to Rwanda in 2022. Jerry and I had many conversations over the years we worked together about competing interests that he faces every day. Welcome, Jerry Lee Jr., Competing Interests. Unmute,
muted.
Jerry. I know, I see your eyes wide. You'll get it. There, ta-da!
It finally popped up. Well, I'm sitting on the edge after hearing Carl's first part about his father. And then I'm also disappointed in Mary because she had knowledge of this framework that I could have been using while I was at the city of Tacoma. The framework that I was using comes from a song with Kenny Rogers. I used to sing it all the time, saying, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. So I'm up here singing this song when I had, Mary had this framework that I could have been using. So Mary, we have a lot to talk about. The definition of ethics. The ethics is a tough one. And I looked up at a dictionary and it said, the set of rules that determine whether an individual or group actions are right or wrong. And after seeing that definition, I started really, I had a knot in my stomach and I realized just how much of a dilemma one can be in when it comes to ethics. Ethics, the decision of whether or not you're going to move forward and how you're going to move forward. And if you're moving forward correctly, and if you have to write ethics, you realize that it's a slippery slope. I was reading this book, it's called Life's a Joke. And there was a story in there about ethics, and it talked about a young man, he was 10 years old. He was talking to his father about business. And he said, Dad, how do you define, or what's ethics? So the father looked at him and pondered for a minute, and he said, excuse me, he said, well, son, as you know, your uncle and I have a business together. And so we have a marketing. And so imagine a customer comes in and he buys a $50 item, but he accidentally gives us $70. Well, son, if I take that $20 extra cost and I split it with your uncle, that's ethics. And the son looked at him and he said, oh, okay. Now notice in that discussion, it was nothing about the customer. It was all about the two individuals. And I really believe that they believed that that was ethics. So when I thought about this and I started thinking about the stories, the many stories where I had to fall in line in terms of my job with the city of Tacoma, especially. I can't go into specifics because I could possibly be called for a consultation, or it could even be where I could be asked to be deposed because some of those matters are still existing. But the dilemma from being an EEO officer is this. You have a ruling policy through the city, PMP 130, which talks about the anti-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation laws and rules for the city. And then you have the city management, which you are a part of as the EEO officer, but you're still not a manager per se. And then you have the employees who are supposed to be, who comes to work there under the policy that protects them from a harassing or discriminatory environment. Oftentimes you have to make decisions where you have to decide as the EEO officer where you fit in. Do you go against management? Do you represent the employees? Or do you stay within the law of PMP 130? Well, I used to pride myself by saying I enforce the policy and I stick within the policy and I'm always right. Well, you start realizing that you don't know your values and other people's values can totally be separate. And so you're constantly weighing the difference. And one of the big ones that I'll never forget and I laugh about to this day was where I had to go to legal to discuss, my finding and what I believe occurred. Legal so much didn't want to move forward on my suggestion that they had 3 attorneys in the room and they both were given their reasons why they could defend it. And I said to them, I could give Johnny Cochran and F. Lee Bailey in their prime and put them on your team, and I could wipe all of you on the walls with yourself. And they looked at me like, gee, Jerry, you feel that strong about it? And I said, yes. And walked out the room, and then they decided to move forward on my suggestion. But it takes that kind of commitment. It takes that kind of belief. But trust me, if you stay around long enough, you realize that you don't have it right all the time. I look at what's going on in society today, and I can't say enough for us to step back and understand that if you look at how people feel about the mandates of the mask or being a part of the having the vaccine, a lot of people really feel that their ethics, their beliefs are truly safe and something that is right. That is something that they believe in. So how do you manage that? That is something that I find to be challenging, fun, and maybe that's why I started singing the song by Kenny Rogers so much. I used to be in a position, I remember going to the legislature, switching gears a little bit, and being asked to ask for money for my department and walking into the legislature where they have a Republican hold at this particular year. And I had to sit down and think, okay, now I want to maintain, my values and really push forward for what I believe we should be funded for. But in the same breath, I want to make sure I'm heard. So how do I not compromise myself? Well, I thought about it and I said, wait a minute. The Republican Party is really big on small businesses. I'll go in and explain to them the benefits that we provide small businesses. And that's all I talked about. I did not say we help the general public. I did not say that this is good for the people. I talked about how businesses will benefit. I didn't feel that I sacrificed any of my efforts by doing that because I was sincere in what I said. But in the same time, I was able to find a common ground that we could move forward on. And it's a continued struggle throughout to make a decision on those ethics and where you go. I'd like to leave with 3 thoughts that I share with you. And I had to learn this for myself, and it's don't let your values get in the way of seeing someone else clearly. It's a paradox that our values seem absolute to us, when in fact, they're deeply personal. They're highly personal. And so you have to keep that in mind. Each person has a set of ethics that guides them. And as long as they're in internal logic, they probably don't care whether the rule makes sense to you or anyone else for that matter. And so that's something that is in this political climate. How do we manage that? You have to keep that in mind. And lastly, a reminder, you don't have to agree with or approve of the people's ethics. But if you are unable to understand and accept them as they are, you'll find yourself at a disadvantage in business, politics, and in a social setting and social interactions. So you have to find that common ground. And I'll end with what I used to do when I taught cultural awareness. And I saw dilemmas where people had strong feelings about one side or another. And I'm a date myself. Some of you may know this commercial, some of you may not, but I call it the EEO commercial. There were 2 groups of people in the room, one side sitting on one side sitting on the other. And one said to the other group, it's less filling. And when they said less filling, some of you might remember that commercial, the other side yelled out, tastes great. And if you remember that commercial, why I call it the EEO commercial is because if you remember, they are going to blows against each other. Tastes great, less filling. Tastes great, less filling. Tastes great. And you sit there and you say, how can I saddle this and remind them that they both love the beer? We all love the beer. We're all in common ground. What's going to turn us around as a country where we could realize that at the end of the day, we all love the country. We all have values. Some people have their strong values and you see it all the time. Some people say, America, love it or leave it. Other people feel that they have a right to change the voting. Other people feel you shouldn't be able to take a knee to bring attention to an issue that you find is dear to your heart. So at the end of the day, I'm going to continue singing that song. You have to know where to hold them and know where to fold them. And I am going to use this framework on some decisions that I have to make so I could probably make a more objective decision on my decision. So thank you, Mary, Ms. Toastmaster.
Jerry, thank you. I wasn't really holding out on you, Jerry. Toastmasters didn't come up with this until a couple of years ago. So yeah. We all could have used it. Yeah. Thank you so much. One of the things I love about all of our panelists is, what I've heard from all of them tonight is truly some the kind of conversations I could have with them on any given day. So, if this is the kind of conversation you love, keep coming to Sound Advice, folks. This is where we have these kind of conversations. It's a terrific way. I am going to ask for your questions, and if you would send them to me, that's Mary Morrison. I will feed them to the panel, and I'll give you a second or so to come up with some questions. And we'll start. And if you could be specific, if there's somebody specifically you want to ask the question of, let me know that too. Just give you a second to do that. Well, as long as it takes you to type.
Some of us type pretty fast.
Some type faster than others. I can't think, type, and talk at the same time. Okay, I'm going to just begin with the ones I've begun to see. Jerry, here's a question for you. I love how you said it's important to not let your values get in the way of seeing or hearing the other person. How do you listen actively and intentionally to hear past your own values without compromising them?
Wow, that's a good question. A lot of times I have to remind myself, Jerry, your background and your experiences are different and you can't walk in someone else's shoes. And so I remind myself of that all the time. It's almost similar to when some of my female friends will always say, you don't know what it's like to have a baby. I think that's the most unfair statement that my female friends can make to me, because they're absolutely right. I don't know what it's like to have a baby, and I never will. However, when I listen to people's statements, I try to just listen and understand that I can't understand everything right away, and that my background and experiences are not similar to theirs. And so I try to understand as much as humanly possible.
All right, thank you, Jerry. Next one is for Kyle. Your story had a lot of emotion involved. How do you see, or where do you see that emotion comes into play on the ethical framework? Do you see the connection between the two? Yes.
Yes. So I had not seen this before we started talking about this, and I was sitting and looking at this and comparing it to what I went through on Thanksgiving. Core values is certainly there, and the core values are indications, or emotions are indications of core values. I was angry because I feel like I'm being disrespected by my brother. So I obviously would like some respect. On the other hand, I want to provide a Thanksgiving dinner for my brother and my father because it's who I am. I'm a nurturer. And I value a sense of connection with the people I love. So I want to give them a chance to have a sense of connection. So that emotion is an indication of the core value. And I wanted to point out that the last question on here, at the very bottom, leads me to act as the person I want to be, the decision. That was the biggest challenge, was who do I want to be here? So does that help? I think that helps.
I think it helps. I think it's nice to be able to bridge,
Yeah.
To bridge it. Yes. So it's more about thinking, paying somewhat attention to the values, almost like if I were rewriting the ethical framework, I might begin with, what value do you believe is being violated such that you think that this is an ethical dilemma for you?
Sure.
All right. To Judy, when processing the ethical framework, what happens if the core values of the organization are inadequate for guiding a clear decision?
Values of the organization are inadequate for guiding the decision. What an excellent question. As I thought about this, values are not always in writing. And they're often behind what's in the written word. On the national level, I've thought about it a lot because the United States Supreme Court has heard a case regarding a woman's right to an abortion. And I do have an opinion about this, and I got curious and I reread parts of the United States Constitution. And of course, it does not say a woman has a right to an abortion. We don't find those words. And certain words of the Constitution are hard for me to reconcile. As a matter of jurisprudence, I can see both sides more than I could see it when I was thinking of my own opinion. The values of so you really do go to your own core values and how important they are. I think for Toastmasters, one of the reasons I stay with the organization is that our core values of integrity, respect, service, and excellence do mirror my own, and I think probably are going to be adequate. But I'd say if they're not adequate, you dig deeper within yourself. If I may respond briefly to the question Kyle got about emotion, when Mary asked she asked me to be on the panel and explained that she'd asked about a framework before she sent me the framework. So I began to think about my own framework, and the first thing I thought was get upset, get anxious or worried or angry. Like I was a little bit angry about that officer for not offering to resign, and then calm down. Now, and I had that in the first draft of my speech, but I didn't have time to say that. And I agree with Kyle that it shows you care. If you've got some emotion, it shows you care. You don't need to reject your emotions, but manage them so that you can act fairly, which often means acting logically.
Great. Thank you, Judy. I'm going to ask this next question ask each of the panelists to give their take on the question, because I think it's such a valuable question for this conversation. What kinds of values provide the best kind of framework for making hard decisions? So what kind of values are you talking about that provide a good framework for making hard decisions? And I'll start with you, Kyle, Judy, and then Jerry.
So I'm going to refer to, is it Richard Bowles who did What Color's Your Parachute?
Yes.
I read that years ago, and I decided to do some of the exercises he did. And one of the ones I did is I took a bunch of 3x5 cards and I wrote values. I tried to keep it to one word or a really short phrase on a card. And then you sit down and you imagine your life, you compare the values to see which is most important. And some of them are really easy, and some of them aren't. Like family and health, which is more important? And what he says, you imagine your life having all of one and none of another, and how does that feel? And then imagine it the other way, and how does that feel? The one that feels worse is the more important value. And I sat down and I did this hierarchy of values. And so I had my top 10. Now, I'm sure my values have shifted a little since then, but having that set was really useful. It made some decisions really easy. When my company asked me to move to LA, I knew immediately I wasn't going. I didn't have to think about it. My wife is in medical school. She's not leaving medical school. There's no medical school like this down in LA. I like spending time with her. I'm not going to LA. Besides, I don't think he could pay me enough to live in LA. But anyway,
Jerry might take you on that one.
It was.
No, I wish about 12 million others thought the same way.
Anyway, you couldn't pay me enough. It was a really easy decision because I knew my values were really clear at that time. I hadn't thought about the value of my desire for connection with my brother versus my desire to maybe give my father and my brother a chance to have connection. That's getting into a level of subtlety that I had not considered.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Judy.
That is a really good question. What kinds of values help you make the decision? The first word that came to my mind was the universal values. Think of fairness, generosity, respect. And then there's organizational values and relational values that come into play. It is a reason I like that framework. You can list them all and see the impact of all of them and which one's going to prevail. There was the relational value asking an officer to resign. I don't want to discourage any members. And there was also, as Mary said, you want to give people grace. That's another value of generosity. How much grace are you going to give this person? And my time is up. When you work it through on the framework, though, I think that's helpful.
All right. And I think what I did was ask Rosanna to time any single question if it went more than 3 minutes. So Rosanna, if you could go ahead and you can eliminate that red, because I do want to hear Jerry's answer. That was even though it was a single question, it was 3 people answering. So thank you for that. So Jerry, what kind of values?
It's a hard one. I always thought of a selfish value. If you feel and believe that you have good intent in your heart, then you understand that you can make a decision that it's not a popular decision. But I ask myself, can I live with that decision? I don't believe in guilt. I believe in doing things correctly. There's a couple of decisions I make that still haunts me that I say, oh, I should have went the other way. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't have changed anything had we gone the other way. I did what I thought was correct, even though I resent later to myself about that decision. But I think it has to be selfish. And I know that's a bad word in a lot of ways, but the core of my belief is that you have to think about yourself and survive. And then you have to look at what your motives and things like that. So that's a tough question.
Yeah. I think I appreciate that the phrase I heard and used a lot while working was, is that worth falling on your sword for? Because you're often faced with depending on what your position is, but you're faced with so many competing values or decisions. There's no good decision, maybe even. So is it worth falling on your sword for? Is this one that you would be willing to be fired for, or lose your job for, get demoted for? And you have to think, some level, you have to, be very practical and very selfish, especially when dealing with organizational values that may compete with your own personal values. If you're working for an organization that's for profit, that may not always, you may not always agree with that. So thank you. I'm going to I have a couple more questions. When making a decision, I think this is to Kyle. A leader may have to make a challenging decision, but don't other people have to deal with the cost of that decision also? What do you do with them?
That's interesting, because I'm going to relate it back to the Cert issue. So a squad is there with a squad leader. And while we're volunteers, we attempt to train people to, when we're deployed, to act in a military fashion, meaning the squad leader makes a decision, the decision's made, you go. And the squad leader's job is to keep his or her team safe. So if the squad leader decides the house is too dangerous, you're not going in, the team leaves. Now, you and I both know that there's going to be some people who are going to inflict guilt on themselves because they didn't go into that house. There's nothing we can do to stop that. Some people do that. My wife and I, years ago, we had a lovely dog named Puka, and the time came and we had to put her down. And I don't feel any guilt about it. We made the right decision at the right time for the dog. My wife feels guilty about it. It is a choice. I don't do guilt. I'm a little like Jerry. I don't do guilt. If I know I made the right decision at the right time, when the temptation to feel guilty comes up, I crush it. If that makes any sense. I don't do guilt. So, and if I start feeling guilty, it's an indication, maybe I'm not listening to my values, and maybe I need to change something I'm doing. The last thing I want to say is, the team may have to live with some of the consequences of the decision. The leader may have to live with some of the consequences of the decision, but that doesn't mean you have to live with it without seeking help. One of the things we are trying to train our teams to do in the Cert group is, at the end of every day, debrief. What did you see? How do you feel about it? What decision is really bugging you? You want to have them talk about it in their team so they don't take it home and spill it out on their wife and family. You'd rather have them deal with it with their team members, at least start the processing of it. So just because you have to live with a decision doesn't mean you have to live with it without help.
All right. Thank you. I think that was going to be, that will be our last question. I do want to give us just about a 5-minute break, which by my clock is at 5 minutes to the hour, so that we can come back and do, maybe audience members have a scenario, having heard this, that you'd like us to wrestle with. And then we're going to go into our evaluation portion of the meeting. So come back at 5 minutes to the hour.
Jerry, your comment when you were talking about listening to other people's values and realizing that while you may not agree with them or appreciate them, may not even understand them, understanding them and agreeing with them is not a requirement. Made me think about a discussion I had where the idea was put forward that one of the great ideas, one of the great concepts that humanity seems to have that has been detrimental to us and causes a lot of problems is that it's the idea that my experience is more valid than yours.
And so much of belief is experiential.
Mm-hmm.
But I will add, though, that we've been, in America, we've been bamboozled because other people are telling us what other people are thinking. Other people are telling us what's meant. If you even look at a presidential debate, the biggest insult I've ever had is where the commentary after the president's debate, they're going to tell you what they said. And I'm seeing that happen in America all too often. They're going to tell you what you just heard. And so they almost pin you together to tell you that, don't you believe in this? Or,
well, the president didn't really say that. He really said this.
Exactly.
No, he didn't.
And so I see that happening all so often that when I hear things now, I just go, if I'm interested, I want to do my own research, because I have found that in America, we don't have history as much as we have his story. And so I challenge my friends to always, look beyond, look the next step further.
Yep.
I'm going to call us, go ahead and call us back. And one of the backgrounds to tonight's meeting, what led our club to kind of get involved in this whole discussion of ethical dilemmas and ethical leadership to begin with, was, as a Toastmasters club, we're always kind of, many clubs too, also not just this club, but struggle with, what do you do to retain and refresh, renew new members while retaining the past members, especially if you think you're going to head in a different direction, or this was initially a night where we thought, well, let's wrestle with that as a club a little bit. And that grew into then, well, let's just wrestle with ethical leadership in general, which is a much broader topic. So I'm going to ask our club president, James, if he wanted to either ask a question, and it could be both, comment on anything that you heard tonight that might help you as the leader of this club do something that might be different based on what you've heard, or if you have a question you'd like the group to consider and give you a little bit of sound advice about.
I love the way you played that there. Well done. I was actually contemplating on this during the presentations, and I was abstracting, as I do. I meta-analyze my meta-analysis so much, and I was thinking about how much I was focusing on the content of these presentations and how amazing the content was. The presentations themselves were also awesome, but there was ums and ers here and there still, but we had technical issues with Judy here, and it was a bit fuzzy over there with Jerry. So it's like they're not like pristine, hyper professional, super high quality, polished blockbuster production presentations from the presentation side, but the content was so powerful. And I was reflecting on that, and I'm like, this is a picture of the challenge I think that we're facing in many ways as a club. Because as a club, we focus a lot on the content that we're presenting, the value of the content of our presentations and our speeches, which is of service to the district, to the guests who come in, who talk, who guest speakers come in and present content. And like we have guest speakers here tonight, which are fantastic. And this is something that we offer to guests and members, and both of them get the same value from it in that sense. But in Toastmasters, when you're giving an evaluation, what do we always say? Don't evaluate the content, evaluate the presentation, because that's where people grow, right? That's where, and it's like hit me. I was like, this is an analogy or a picture of the challenge. Like, as members, we're also trying to learn and grow, become better leaders, people who are better equipped to present fantastic content, right? And so there's this dilemma, this tension between how do we serve our members, have a unique offering for them at the same time as still offering fantastic quality content that adds value to our guests who may not have the, like Kyle, don't have the bandwidth to have extra more and more meetings and clubs and things like that. It's a tough decision of how do you balance these two audiences, these two services, in a sense that are being offered, that where we are judging the content as well as the presentation, and finding a path forward in that, I think, is kind of where I've sat as the president, as I've wrestled with this and trying to figure out defining our values to make this ethical decision. That's why I asked them those questions about how do you find the right values? Because, you know, all Toastmasters clubs have, you know, RISE as our values. You know, we all agree that respect, you know, integrity, service, and excellence are really great things. But that doesn't distinguish how to have a particular Toastmasters club. What does that mean for us, right? What are the unique values for us that guide us in this particular challenge? And I'm not sure yet. I'm still looking for that. And that's why I want to hear from the members, you know, what particularly resonates with you. So like you're saying, Mary, of what can we carry and speak to the authentic values of the people who are here present. And also maybe some guidance from our guests and our experts here and so on. I saw Sherry have her hand up though. So
yes, thanks, James. I actually had an ethical dilemma about coming tonight because Mary had asked me to be a speaker. And I said, no, I can't because I won't be available. I was supposed to be on a cruise in the Caribbean right now. And because of the new I can't even think what it is. Omicron.
Yeah.
Then we canceled our cruise. Mm-hmm. So then I started debating, do I not show up because I've already told them I'm not going to be there, and will it be bad? So I sent Mary a message saying, I will be there, but I wanted you to know why I'll be there, because I turned you down and I was afraid you'd feel like, well, you're making up excuses so you don't have to. So anyway, I'm glad I came, and I was able to evaluate Judy's speech, which was wonderful. And I think all of our speakers did a great job tonight, and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Kyle.
Yeah, I put in the chat a paraphrase from a book I was reading earlier today. But great product plus getting your target market right plus effective marketing leads to success. And if you're missing one of those things, it's going to fail or a struggle. Now, I think Sound Advice is a great product. The content you're talking about, the quality of the people in the club and the quality of the meetings you put on is good. I think sometimes Sound Advice markets effectively and sometimes it doesn't. No criticism to anybody here. Marketing in a session on ethical leadership is a tough sell. It's one of those topics that people hear. I mean, when I first heard it, I was like, and then I had to think about it. And then I saw how Mary renamed it, and I was like, oh, and I went through Thanksgiving and I was like, oh, this is happening in my life right now. Okay, I'll do it. But my first reaction was Snorefest. So effective marketing of the topic. Here's the thing. Here's where you might have an option. What is the correct market? Now, we have assumed the correct market for Sound Advice is leaders within District 32. Because Sound Advice is online, you're no longer you're limited to District 32. If you are willing to think outside the advanced club box, you might decide that you're no longer limited to Toastmasters. maybe you just want to talk to leaders in general around the world. And you can narrow that even further. Leaders who are struggling with particular issues.
We're thinking possibly mentorship issues is one of the things that surfaced in some of our discussions.
Yeah. The book I'm reading, one of the points he makes is don't target when you're trying to niche yourself, don't niche based on demographic, niche based on problem.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
I think that's what ethical leadership, and you're right, the marketing could have been better, but the concept, it's a universal appeal for leadership. I see Linda has come on camera, and I would love to hear what Linda has to say, because I'm guessing that she came on camera because she has something she's going to add.
No, I just wanted to show I was laughing because there's so many good laughter points, but since I have the floor and you asked for guests,
absolutely
dangerous thing with Linda around.
I'd love to hear. This is my current dilemma that just came across my screen last night. One of our members, of course, I'm in District 2 and I'm a club growth director, so people ask me the hard questions. And so her hard question is, I have a business and I'm an organizational expert, and I truly believe that my marketplace is club officers, and I think they should pay me money to help them be more effective and more organized in their efforts so that they could run a great club. And so how can I market that in Toastmasters? And of course, the big money flag comes up, and you have to look at the rules and you go, well, there isn't really a rule against marketing, but I think that there's this, I'd love to hear people's opinions. I have an opinion, but I'd love to hear people's opinions about marketing, targeting Toastmasters, and we're all here to network, but we network in different ways for different purposes. But what about when you add the money layer? Like I'm selling something. So go.
I can actually comment a bit on that. So starting my own business, right? My entire list was composed entirely of Toastmasters. I couldn't network or market to people that were in my current list without marketing to Toastmasters. And in doing so, I had to frame it in context of how am I adding value to them being better Toastmasters. And so my first clients were all Toastmasters. My first, I'm still in business because of Toastmasters. I've been able to broaden my market beyond that, and I'm reaching out and was able to migrate from my temporary target market audience of the Toastmasters that I know to my ideal target market audience of digital remote professionals and hybrid organizations. But I had a bridge there, but I had to start with Toastmasters because that's what I had, right? And so I had to do that, and it worked great. And Toastmasters are amazing people for helping get a small business off the ground. And it's a lot more affordable than the chamber. I'll add that. So for me, I didn't see it as an ethical dilemma because you're finding an ethical dilemma in the context of something that is a conflict of values. It lined perfectly because I love Toastmasters. I love adding value to them. And I believe that my services are adding value to Toastmasters. I also believe that I need to eat. This is another value of mine. And so being able to work for myself in something that I'm passionate about was something that was hugely important to me. And so those synergized together. And so I did as asking a favor as a friend. It's like, hey, here's something I'm doing. Would you appreciate pitching in and helping out by helping jump on board with these things that I'm offering and so on? And many of the people here actually all did, a lot of them did, and helped me out with that. So that was kind of some of my experience, just kind of throwing that out there.
Can I highlight something there, James?
Yeah.
You did something that I think is classic service-based, presentation-based marketing, and it's one of the reasons there wasn't a conflict. You went to your Toastmaster friends and said, I have the service, I want to give it to you. Would you take it and give me feedback? And then at the end, you said, by the way, if you'd like to continue this, I'm going to do this paid based thing.
Yep.
At that point, it's optional. But
Right.
you gave it away. You gave value. And what I would say to this person who wants to sell organizational skills to club members, be my guest. Come to the conference or president's breakfast or something and give a free talk on or how to organize, and do not sell during the speech. You can, if you want to have DVDs in the back of the room, the Toastmaster will tell people about it. If you want to put flyers on the table so they can find it, fine. But come and give a speech with value, no selling in the speech.
Yep. I did that too.
All right.
Yeah.
So friends, I love this conversation, and I got to tell you how much I love it. It's after 8 o'clock, and I don't feel like I need to fall asleep just now. So that's awesome.
It's after 10 over here.
I know, exactly. It's late. But I do need to close this portion of the meeting to turn it to our general evaluator, James, who has 10 minutes to ask for, to provide feedback and ask for additional feedback. So take it away, James. You have 10 minutes. And
awesome.
Roseanne, if you would give him the timing devices at 8, 9, and 10, that'd be awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you so much for putting this on. This was originally, like you had mentioned, going to be kind of a in-house review panel of previous discussion leaders. And we're going to look back and rehash over and give evaluation feedback to each other. And you took it and then you turned it into something awesome. It was really super amazing. And we still got to do some of that. So that was really awesome. So I really appreciate the effort that you put into this and pulling together these amazing panelists and helping them organize. I particularly love, and yes, we are going to go deeper into the in-house review later still. I'm going to hammer on that. But I particularly loved how the topics of the three presenters meshed together so well, so beautifully in this nice sequence of how to communicate and how to wrestle with conflicting values, and how do you process logically and rationally to kind of stay true to your values and yet still stay rational about what's going on. And in a process, you're not seeing any blind spots or issues. You're not missing anything with Judy's. And then Kyle's like, now that you know what you're supposed to do, how do you do it when it's emotionally difficult? Right. And then Jerry also talking about how to deal with other people who have other values and how to communicate with them and how to collaborate with them and how to connect with them without violating either set of values. And it's a really natural progression that all synergize beautifully without stepping on each other's toes. And so masterfully coordinated between you, Mary, and all the presenters. And then managing the questions and then the responses and a very thoughtful response that came out of that, I really, really appreciated. And then, of course, there was technical issues in the middle of it that we were able to get it resolved, and with poise and with promptitude, and so we were able to get that sorted. And I don't think we lost significant value there, and so it worked out. I really appreciated that. I would like to ask for a round robin evaluation of the different presenters and also the structure and the organization. If people could unmute and then share something they liked, something that could be improved, and you can't repeat something that somebody else has already said, as Kyle has so well established as a good rule of thumb for a round robin evaluation. Does anybody have something you think that we really, really loved and something that could be improved? The people who go earlier get an easier job. Rosanna.
I liked the honesty of the flow. Judy started with the structure. And whenever emotions get high and ethic is at a crossroads, we think, okay, what are the rules? What should I be thinking? Because my mind is boggled. And then it flowed into, let's be honest about our emotions. let's name the emotion. And then lastly, know when to fold them. And that beautiful melody. This is an honest way anybody could have done what we have learned tonight because of the three speakers, because of this topic. And I am so impressed with the magic. I don't even believe it's like church. You don't believe the message is coming from a higher power, but when three strangers get together with a passion on a topic and the message becomes one together, it's just Toastmasters. It was awesome.
Magic happens. Thanks, Rosanna. Anybody other have feedback?
So,
Kyle, go ahead, Kyle.
I want to compliment Judy on really covering the structure, the form, the structure well, and incorporating your own story into it. There was one section that you mentioned, but I don't think it had an application in your story, so you didn't highlight it, and that's investigating. And I wanted to highlight that because when a problem is brought to your attention, often the problem as described to you is wrong. And it is really tempting to go off and take action on the problem, and then only after the fact find out somebody didn't describe it right. Somebody, it's this game of grapevine, and the problem finally got to the leader, and you really have to follow it back and find out what the real problem is. Sometimes the problems are very easy to solve and aren't ethical dilemmas with enough investigation.
Very good point. And I think that is very important to highlight. And I noticed that it was actually kind of brought up briefly during the casual conversation at the tail end of that break. So I'm going to leave that in the recording because that covers a little bit more of that particular aspect with Jerry talking about, going further back into the sources. That's really valuable there. So could circle back on that. Sherry.
Thank you, James. I was surprised that I had never come across the form, the ethical framework before. So I am so happy that Mary and Judy have provided that for us. And I definitely will plan to use it and share it with some of my other Toastmasters that may not have come across that before. I think it's a great tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I could have definitely used it way back when in some of my ethical dilemmas and some of my earlier club conflicts. We got stronger because of it, but yeah, it was rough there for a bit, and that would have helped organize the conversation and have a lot more opportunities come out of it if it had been there earlier. Any other feedback? Cynthia?
Yes, I liked the diversity of the panel. I thought that was well thought out and well planned. And as it was stated earlier, that they did merge together into one. And I, like Kyle, went, oh my gosh, it's going to be a interesting meeting. It's too late at night for this topic. But I enjoyed myself, so.
Good. I'm hearing that feedback that I was excited about the topic, but then I've also never been in corporate business world where I'm sure I've heard that these things are told in the blandest possible PowerPoint style to absolute ad nauseum. Yeah. So I'm really glad that we pulled it off in a much better way, but it also makes it challenging to market. So any other feedback? Jerry?
No, it just sounds everybody covered what I was thinking.
You're running out of things to say. We keep stealing it.
Oh no, it's just that I think it was a great flow, good vision, Mary. I don't know if we lived up to what you thought, but I enjoyed it. The emotional part in the middle really got me on the edge because it was really good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I remember when Kyle and I were chatting a while back and you mentioned the kind of topics you're going to cover in this particular speech. And I was like, this is going to be really good and really personal, really a lot of vulnerability. And I believe that a exchange of vulnerability that leads to greater trust is the heart of true connection. And true connection is the powerhouse, the engine by which value is generated. There's no other access. There's no other way to do it. And so bringing that level of personal vulnerability, Judy, you bringing that with your stories, Jerry, all three of you brought vulnerability to the table. And I think that was really what made this whole meeting sing. Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments? The one thing that I thought that I struggled with was there just wasn't enough time. For a 2-hour meeting, it was packed with so much valuable content, and there's so much more to discuss. But this is like the kind of thing I could spend an entire day doing a workshop on, and just like taking each of the ethical dilemmas that each of us brought forward. Could have dived into each one of those and explored it. Maybe
breakout groups.
I was about to say, breakout group. I was just about to say breakout groups on each one of those, but then figuring out, figure out how many if you're going to bring up, and then defeat who's going to be in which one, and on an ad hoc basis, that would have been a nightmare of logistics. But I like the open format as well for a nice change of pace as well. Wishcraft. I actually don't think I've heard of that. No, I have heard of Wishcraft. Pretty sure I have anyway. Anyway, I will now turn it back over to Mary, or actually real quick, sorry, before it goes back to Mary, there is a timer report we still need to get. I saw the twitch in your eye there, Mary. I was distracted by looking at Witchcraft. I had to look back at my agenda over here. Rosanna, could you please give us the timers report?
Yes, in our speeches, climbing the mountain was 13 minutes, 50 seconds. Kyle, I missed your title, 13 minutes, 18 seconds, and competing interests is 10 minutes, 3 seconds.
Okay. Thank you. And then now I'll turn it over to Mary Morrison as our Toastmaster.
All right, thank you, James. I just have a couple of final words, comments. Really, really appreciate the panelists for each one of you for saying yes and bringing something that was of great value to all of our audience members tonight. I regret you didn't have a bigger audience. We do record these meetings and put it on the District 32 Facebook, or not the District 32 YouTube channel, which is a great marketing tool that we don't use enough of to say, hey, if you missed it, here it is. And by the way, upcoming is a meeting that you won't want to miss either. So thank you, particularly to our guests, Jerry and Kyle, for saying yes, and especially participation from Jerry. Thank you for saying yes. Jerry and I have stayed in touch since I've been retired. He's moved on to a different workplace, but it was good to see you. It's been a while. Awesome, wonderful job. Can't wait to hear more of your trip. Love the pictures I did see. You're welcome to come back anytime to a Toastmasters meeting. I don't know where our buddy John is tonight. We gotta come. Gotta come. So thank you both, and thank you, Judy, for sharing such an incredible framework. That, by the way, everyone, that is part of the ethical leadership project, level 5, and it's one of your electives. So
that's where
there
it's
you
in.
go.
Gotcha.
That's where it is.
Gotcha.
That's where it is. And now you have a model for how that can work. With that, I'm going to turn it to our club president, James. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you again so much, Mary. And with that, I am going to formally thank all of you again, and redounding upon Mary's gratitude for attending and making this an amazing meeting, for participating, for conversing, for providing your feedback and everything. Cynthia, you have a comment.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that next month's meeting is on conflict resolution.
Yes, thank you.
We are going to have a speaker and breakout rooms. And so everybody should learn something. It will be fun.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that one. Sounds like that'll be like a nice build upon from this one.
Yes.
So very
Hopefully.
fantastic. I'm looking forward to that one. Excellent. All right. And with that, I'm going to thank you all again for attending. Remember, sign up to keep an eye on our website and keep an eye on YouTube for the recording. Share it. Let people know what we're doing here. And I will say farewell and turn off the recording.